So I'd like to turn now to the discussion, have discussion with our speakers. And the first topic I'd like them to address is the following. What changes can we expect 5 to 10 years from now as a consequence of this pandemic? So put your hand up if you want to address it. And I see John smiling.
Well, I sort of agree with you about what happened after World War II, but I think one of the things about the post-war era was it was a low point in inequality in this country, and in some ways it was a low point in inequality globally. And so it wasn't that inequality went away, but by many measures it was very low then. And what you also had was you had polarization. Again, I'm kind of focusing on the US. You had polarization to some extent, but it was about policies. It wasn't polarization just for its own sake. And so if we can't shift back to that, I don't see how we can redo what we did in post-war, because we've sort of lost both that. We have massive inequality both in the United States and globally, and we have polarization that's not about you and I disagreeing about policy. It's you and I not even sharing a worldview or what facts are or what science is. And so I think I'm quite concerned about that part of it, and I hope that, at least in the United States, our complete lack of science and leadership will maybe get us to think about going back to having science-based leadership. So I hope.
Okay, so you raised the interesting point about the fact that the 50s were a golden era in the US, at least with regard to equality. Things had gotten leveled. But that's changed, and things are actually gone in the opposite direction within the last several decades. So Martin, could we tap you for your wisdom about, and you said you didn't have a crystal ball, but I think that you have ideas.
On this point, I mean, I am concerned, and I'm rather pessimistic, because I think we are going to lose trust, because you've got to get to know people for real and deal with them in order to trust them. And so virtual contacts work fine for those people who already know. I'm sure you'd agree that if you want to collaborate with someone scientifically, you've got to get to know them for real first. So I think we've got to feel that we can trust people to get to know them. But more seriously, I think we do have to worry about two things. One is that there will never be a virus that deals with pandemics properly, and we always will have a worry about the sort of safety of travel and all that, always living rather like we are doing at the moment. And also, alluding to some point I made in my talk, I do worry very much about the fact that a few disruptive people can have far more leverage when they're empowered by technology. I'm thinking not just about sort of bio threats, but also about cyber attacks, which get more sophisticated. And I think there's a real worry that there'll be so many disruptive attacks that society will never run smoothly again. So that's my pessimistic take.
Okay, in some ways, you said it, it's a wake-up call. In other words, I think that now that we are aware of what's going on, we, in a broad sense, and it's gotten our attention, right? Everybody's attention. The second question is, what can we do? If virtualization makes things opaque, how can we make things more transparent so people can see what's behind the curtain? For example, if you plug in your light bulb into the wall socket, electricity streams into your home and lights up the home. Do you know where that electricity came from? Or do you know how much energy it took to produce it, or where the resources are coming from? I'm going to pass it back over to the engineer here, John, because engineers can solve problems for us.
So one of the things is we can't do away with virtualization. All these systems depend crucially on it. But you made a very good point. We plug into the wall, we turn on the faucet, we flush, and we go to Amazon and order stuff and it's delivered, and we never see the consequences of any of that. That's one of the features of virtualization. In longer versions of this, I go into that in some detail. And so, but there is something we can leverage there, because it's true that the consumers don't care and don't know, but they don't know if we made it more sustainable. So one of the things that virtualization allows you to do is swap out all of that hidden hardware for more sustainable hardware. So what we need is the consumer to demand that, even if they don't directly see the consequences until, as Martin has pointed out, all hell breaks loose in 50 years. So I think a silver lining to what's going on right now is that it's a wake-up call. It's also a very special wake-up call in several respects. One is that just medically, the diversity of symptoms and reactions from different people to the same virus is astonishing. And we're learning a lot about our immune systems and our homeostatic regulatory systems from the reaction to this virus. But it's also interesting how diverse countries have been in their response. So we have massive death and massive unemployment, but there are countries that have neither, and they're equally advanced as we are. And so people talked a lot about them: New Zealand, Singapore, the Scandinavian countries other than Sweden. They all have had few deaths and, compared to us, relatively less economic problems. And one thing they all have in common, it seems, is they all have female heads of state. And now I don't happen to think that having a female head of state per se is the solution. But I do think countries that are willing to elect a female head of state probably have turned some kind of corner that we all need to turn. And so one of the things I've been trying to work on is I'm sorry to going on a little bit, I'll try to wrap it up, but this theory of layered architecture and apply it to social architectures. And unfortunately, we don't have very good models in humans for what a good society will look like. But we have some animal models that are remarkable. And if you're interested, go to my website and you can get into a Dropbox with a lot of more details on this. But the elephants and the bonobos and the orcas, which I call the ebos, all have extremely good societies, and they're all matriarchies. But and I don't think that's incidental. So I don't think these things are unrelated. But I'm guessing that guys like us shouldn't be running things.
Okay, Martin wants to make a comment too.
Well, just another comment about 10 years from now, the nature of work is going to change in a number of ways. The daily commute may be less popular. And of course, as you know far better than me, AI is going to take up some of the work that's now done by humans. It's going to do part of the work done by white-collar people, legal conveyancing, medical diagnostics, and things like that. And it's going to, fortunately, replace mind-numbing jobs like those in call centers and in Amazon warehouses. And I think these challenges are going to be whether nations, particularly yours and mine, will accept a high enough tax rate and enough redistribution of wealth to re-employ those people as, say, carers, gardeners in public parks and things like that. Because what's shameful now is that the jobs that we've realized during this crisis are crucial, like carers and drivers, etc., are the ones which are vulnerable. And we surely need to have far more jobs caring for old people, assisting teachers in schools, etc., which can be paid for, in my view, from the public purse by heavier taxation on the wealthy and major conglomerates. So I think if we're going to provide satisfactory work for those people, we need high taxation, but then it can be win-win because we can get rid of the mind-numbing jobs, but find more satisfying work for those displaced.
Martin, okay, we just had a question that came in hot on the wire about this issue, and the person points out that pay is set by the marketplace because of the required skills that are available. How do you propose compensation be established?
Well, I think you could ask countries like Scandinavia, which do a far better job than your country or mine. I don't see any reason why we should not have a very large number of jobs for carers or teacher assistants and pay them well, give them dignified roles with security. We can do that. It may not happen in a free market, but we can certainly do this if we are prepared to expand the public sector. And I believe we should expand the public sector in these social welfare arenas anyway. And of course, if we want to be very radical, we could go the way the Chinese do. They don't worry about these things.
This leads me to the third topic that I wanted to get to, because there's been a lot of discussion in the press about the impact of artificial intelligence, and specifically on how it will impact on jobs. And there's other issues too that are also very important, having to do with fairness and privacy and bias. So if AI is now making decisions, for example, of who a company will hire, and not taking into account some of the issues that are concern humans in terms of being fair, for example, and that is, by the way, being accelerated enormously. This is again going on right now, and at our annual meeting last year, we had large discussions, keynote speeches. This has become a major issue. And one of the issues that was being discussed is the cost function. So in artificial intelligence, what you do is you put your goal into the cost function, and that's what you're trying to optimize. Now, if your cost function, or your goal is to make money, and then you optimize all of the predictions you're making in order to maximize the amount of money you're making, you're obviously you're not going to be paying any attention to the other issues that are that might be equally important, and there are many possible ways of fixing that. And it's not like it's insoluble. In fact, it may be easier to fix an AI system that we built than it is to fix a human being who has biases and is not being fair. But one simple way is to be explicit in your cost function of what it is you're trying to maximize, and put in a term for to reduce bias, put another term in for fairness. But now you're confronted with the issue. You have to put a numerical weight on each one of those terms, and now that's something where society has to make explicit decisions instead of being implicit in the way you run things, where everybody sort of doesn't want to, they may talk about things, but how do you actually quantify it? This is something that we really need to be able to confront directly. So here's the question: how do we get kindness into the discussion here that we're having? Human feelings about tragedies that are going on and so forth. Is AI? I don't think is the solution, but it's a cultural problem. And Pat, I'm going to turn this over to you, because this is something you thought a lot about.
Yeah, I think that as things stand, of course, deep artificial learning is a great and wonderful thing, but all it can do is pattern recognition. And pattern recognition is a great and wonderful thing for many jobs. I mean, if what you are doing is reading an X-ray, for example, it's great to have machine learning look at the X-ray and give you an answer. But nobody, so far as I can tell, nobody within the machine learning domain has the slightest idea of how to capture any aspect of the range of emotions, the idea of caring for another, the idea that certain things matter more than others, or certain things have values more than others. And I don't think anybody has the slightest idea of how to actually get that into an artificial neural network. I mean, there are people who will say, well, it's, you just do more of the same. but I think it's not easy. And so I don't see within the prediction horizon of 10 to 15 years, I don't see that coming online. And I think there's probably no substitute for this aspect of human interaction or of mammalian interaction. I mean, we do this not just with other humans, but with other animals. And the capacity to have these kinds of deep relationships where we care about others, we know who to trust, who not to trust, so forth. These develop over time, and I agree with Martin's concern here that you're not going to easily do those or achieve those kinds of relationships in a Zoom talk. It just isn't going to happen. You need to hang out together, to do stuff together. I'm reminded of a picture of Terry and Jeff Hinton sitting on the steps at Cold Spring Harbor as they were developing their ideas about artificial neural nets. And I, dollars to donuts. It was those personal interactions. You walked along, you talked, you kicked stones, you threw frisbees. That set the platform for being able to achieve really, really interesting things. So yeah, pattern recognition can be done by machine learning, and it can be really, really fancy. Judgment, values, and so forth. I don't see it.
Yes. Could I comment?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, absolutely, Martin.
No, I mean, I agree with that. In fact, Stuart Russell in his book discusses this, going back to can they learn ethics. The problem is that they can't really learn by watching human beings, because they think so fast that for them watching us is like us watching trees grow. And so they can't soak up enough information by watching real people doing things in real time, and that's a problem. And I think going beyond that, we do have to be careful about letting a decision that affects us be made by a machine. And it seems to me that if a machine is going to decide whether we are released from prison, whether we need surgery, whether we get credit, or whether our resume makes the shortlist for a job application, even if we are told that the machine on the whole does a better job than most humans, we still would like to feel that we can be given an explanation we can understand. Unless we can, I don't think we're going to accept this. And so for that reason, I'm very skeptical about how far the machine takeover will be acceptable in these areas.
Okay. I think that you raise another one of these very hot topics right now in AI, which is explainable AI. And we had 10,000 submissions to the 2020 NeurIPS meeting, and I can tell you that a lot of them are specifically focusing on how to extract, and people are very clever about this. In other words, you do another layer, another machine, another deep learning network interrogating an existing deep learning network that allows you to extract out how the algorithm is actually creating a solution or an answer that has properties you want. It's one of the things in my book is that the near term is not going to be the machine is going to take over, because that's kind of science fiction that the robots are coming. No, it's much more complex. And so here's an example. They did a study, was published in Nature, of diagnosing skin lesions. Dermatologists, expert dermatologists, did about 92%, and the best deep learning network at the time did about 92%. So it's clear that they're about the same level. But when they allowed the human and the AI to work together, they got 98% working together.
Yes.
Which means that each one of them is bringing things that are independent of the other and helping to enhance the diagnosis. And it's ultimately the doctor that is, of course, making the final decision. But it's basically a way of enhancing human intelligence. It's not necessarily going to be to replace human intelligence. It's going to enhance it.
I mean, I think in science, of course, they can help by take large samples, and I think that string theory in 11 dimensions, geometry is so hard, but I hope that maybe a computer of the kind that could be a world champion at chess and Go might be able to do 11-dimensional geometry and see if a particular string theory is correct. That's an example. But of course, we know already that machines can do a good job in managing large networks, electricity grids, traffic flows, and things like that. And in principle, if the Chinese wanted it, they could have the kind of planned economy which Marx and Stalin could only dream of, because it can monitor every financial transaction in the country, the stock in every shop and all that. So it could make a very, very efficient planned economy, which no set of humans could ever do, because they couldn't process information fast enough. So many things it can do. So we shouldn't disparage the potentialities, but it's just many things it can't do as well.
Good. Okay, Martin, the question just came in that's relevant. The question is, do you believe in philosopher kings?
Human or not robotic?
Have they ever existed?
I doubt it. I mean, there have been lots of despots, but despots some wise than others. But I'm not sure that that's a form of government we'll ever go back to. But I think what we don't want to have is a machine which is deemed to be wise, so that in fact decisions are delegated to a machine, which leads to a megaverse of the problems I alluded to of having your fate decided by a machine. To have a country's fate decided by a machine would be even worse.
Okay, John, you want to step in?
Just to say a couple of things, which is the kind of hidden fragilities I talked about from our existing technologies and our biology. The way AI is going to put that on steroids. So we're going to have it's massively fragile systems. And I think explainable AI is a baby step towards a robust AI. But we're so far from a robust AI. And I think it's fine if we deploy it in places where it's not mission critical in any sense. But it's getting used in places where I think it's going to be very unsafe. And so I think that's a big problem, which is both explainable AI, but also what is robust AI? What does it even mean? And I think the AI we have right now is, I mean, it's famously brittle and fragile, and I think that's a major challenge.
Yeah.
Very muted.
There was a question that came in that I think is addressed to me. The 50s weren't an ideal day or time for African Americans and other people of color or women. What makes you think or believe this? And I misspoke. I was saying specifically with regard to the overall, how well the society, the middle class was growing. It was obviously the minorities, underrepresented minorities, were starting from a much lower level, and it wasn't as rosy as perhaps looking back it was for them. But I think, though, that this is now beginning to happen, that we're becoming aware of the implicit and not just the explicit problems that underrepresented minority and women have had to live with. And I think that this is, again, an opportunity. This may be one of the silver linings that's going to come out of this crisis, is that we may actually be able to accelerate that process of bringing up all Americans and the world to a higher awareness of this problem that we face. So, Pat, do you want to say anything about that? This is an issue that you thought about.
Well, actually, what I was thinking about was the sweet spot that John said is missing from the judicial system, where there's the legislature, the courts, and the police. And it's for me a very different way of looking at the problem, and it's a way that has really captured my interest. So part of what I wanted to ask John was, so how do we go about figuring out where that sweet spot should be? And presumably it means reconfiguring those three elements. And obviously you've thought about this. So I don't know whether there's a quick answer to that. Probably not. I probably need to go to your website. But it's a fascinating way of looking at it, because it does sort of focus the mind in a very special way.
Yeah, so the flip answer is we need more Black women in every layer.
Okay, that's a good start.
If one thing hasn't struck you about the last few weeks is you go on CNN or whatever, and you see these very impressive Black women mayors, and then you listen to very stupid old white men argue against them. And so that's the flip answer. But the deeper answer, I don't think that's an accident. And I think here's a silver lining that is way too rosy to be true. But we have always, and this is very U.S. centric, we have always benefited from groups emerging when we took our knee off their throat.
True.
Because once you've been in this country for a long time and you're well off and everything, you get fat, lazy, and stupid.
That's right.
And so one of the potential silver linings is that we really embrace the diversity. And traditionally we've dealt with diversity in two ways. Either you segregate or you assimilate.
Yeah.
And that's not how you get a diversity sweet spot. You get a diversity sweet spot by embracing the diversity and putting things in the right place. And we're not doing that. And so I think we could do that. I think we could do that much better. And we're obviously not doing it in the legal system. We're doing it fairly well, say, in something like the internet. We do have a pretty good job there, but then of course we get social media sitting on top of that, hijacking it. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a little silver lining in that we may start looking at, but the thing I get worried about is that we're going to stop at the police. And we're not going to, right. So right. Again, I'm not sitting there going, I'm not here to defend the police or anything. I'm just saying that they're the tip of the spear.
Yeah.
But you got to look behind to who's holding the spear. Yeah. And but the weird thing is when you talk to people who are specialists in things like economics and politics and political science, they don't think this way.
No, they don't.
They don't think about layered architectures. They don't think about systemic fragilities. They don't think about any of these issues. And so one of the things I'm hoping to do is try to move some of these ideas into those areas. And I'm starting to get some interest in looking at these more architectural and systemic features of all of our systems. But I think I want to just end with just one more thing, which is a word Terry used, which is kindness. Mm-hmm. That's maybe the most important missing thing. And I mean kindness, and I don't mean empathy. we don't need to understand each other all that well. We need to be kind to each other.
Yeah.
And we can't rely on us understanding each other in great depth in order to be kind. We can be kind. I have 3 cats. I try to be kind to my cats. I don't understand my cats. They don't need me to understand them. They need me to be kind to them.
That's right.
Most babies don't need to be understood. They need to be cared for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I think that's a thing, which is that really understand each other. That's hard and good goal. We should try, but we can be kind anyway. And I think that's the thing is that we've got to think about robustness and kindness and all these hidden fragilities that we've got to avoid at the same time. So that's.
Could I just ask a question, Pat? Which was, I agree with everything you just said. I think it was amazing. But the question I had for you is, how do you transform your intellectual sweet spots and all these things into a language or into a practice that can be utilized by the people who are now suffering from the problems? And by the way, good day for picking it, Juneteenth. Nice one. Very good. Very good. I like that. But how do you do that? How do you get that to work?
Well, first of all, I'm a mathematician. That's not.
Say, this is what you should possibly be doing, because you're talking about changing a legal system.
Yeah. Well, I'm encouraged a little bit about, when we think about how we went from the phone system to the internet. And the phone system is not very layered, and it's not very flexible. And once we understood what layering meant and what you needed for a layered architecture, and again, there was maybe a handful of people on the planet that understood that, but we were able to deploy that. But it's going to take, the thing is, it's going to take, what I need to do, if I'm serious about this, is I need to get these ideas in the hands of people that can actually do something with them. And it's the same way with engineering. I'm not really an engineer. I'm a mathematician. And so you don't want me going and I do biomedical stuff too, but you don't want me going anywhere near a patient, and you don't want me going anywhere near a real engineered system. What you have to do is have sophisticated engineers who can understand the math and then make it happen. And so I'm hoping to cultivate what would be the equivalent of the control engineer in something like political science and economics, where they can understand these ideas about architecture and how to create diversity sweet spots, and then figure out how to do it in the specific domain. Just like I work with doctors about how to do this for medicine, because I'm just doing the math.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Martin.
Yeah, so Martin is going to chime in on this topic. Go ahead.
Well, just on kindness, it goes back to what I said earlier, that jobs like carers for old people are disgracefully underpaid and underappreciated. They're just the kind of jobs which should be well paid and given status and supported in very large numbers by the state. That's just one example of that. And if I could make another link remark, I think if we think internationally, we do have to realize that the one thing which people in disadvantaged parts of the world do have access to is the internet. They may not have toilets or anything else, but they do have the internet, so they know what they're missing. And this is a recipe for mass embitterment, mass migration, and mass conflict, unless the developed countries take this on board and do something as a mega Marshall Plan, as it were, to prevent Africa from falling behind. Because the one thing they do have is the knowledge of what they're missing and the injustice of their fate.
And one of the things about, again, going back to World War II, I mean, we bombed much of the planet into the Stone Age, and we had, again, relatively less inequality. I just mean economic inequality. I don't mean racial inequality. There was tons of racial inequality, tons of. I just mean there was, and we came roaring out of that. And so if we devoted our resources to a Marshall Plan, as we did after World War II, it would be so good for everybody, but a handful of very rich owners, stock owners. They're the only people that would suffer from that. Yeah. And so, but getting that to happen when they own 2/3 of that legal architecture is going to be very difficult. Maybe they own the police too, but they certainly own the legislature, and they certainly own the courts.
That's right.
Yes.
So I want to inject a comment here, going back to the suggestion that John gave, that if we wanted to improve things, we should have more Black women in decision-making positions. Well, I think we're actually heading in that direction, because there must be at least a half a dozen countries in the world right now that have female, prime ministers or presidents.
They're all the countries that are doing well in the pandemic.
Well, that's a good sign that those countries are
Norway, Finland, Taiwan, Singapore, New Zealand, Germany. They're doing well when their neighbors are getting hammered.
Yeah, that's very, very important.
I mean, Finland and Norway are doing great. Sweden's doing terrible. Germany's doing pretty well. Their neighbors are doing terrible. And so, again, and it's not necessarily the women head of state. It's that those countries are willing to have a woman head of state. And I think that's, and again, I want to sort of say a real woman, in the sense that they're not women that have gotten there by being more of a man than the men in the room. And so I think that's essential. And again, the animal societies that really work are all matriarchies. But also, the people who are going to be most creative in solving these problems are the people that have been on the outside.
Yeah.
They're hungry. If they can be educated and given power, they can make changes that'll help us all.
There's a wonderful book by somebody that you will all know called Melvin Connor, who's at Emory.
Oh, yeah.
And it's called Women After All. It's been out for some time now. The subtitle, as I look at it, was Sex, Evolution, and the End of Male Supremacy. He regards the last 10,000 years essentially as an unfortunate blip. So you would probably like that book, John.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but I know about it. But there's quite a literature on this, and so, and there is, again, there's speculation that the last 10,000 years of patriarchy really was a blip, and that before that, a little bit more like the bonobos, but now we're just chimps with guns.
I think we should probably all just shut our screens down and let me carry on by herself here. I mean.
Okay, well, so go ahead, Roger. Go ahead.
No. I just wanted to press John again on that point. I'm maybe if we should talk some other time, but how you go from your slides to a different world. What I mean, have you thought about the steps?
Yeah, I mean, again,
Roger, you're asking him to develop
reinvent the world.
You're asking him to develop a whole new social framework, complete with all the organizations, and I don't think it's a bad thing. Not that he needs my defense, but I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing for him to say, look, once you can convince some economists and political scientists and sociologists of the basic idea, then they are the ones who can pick up the ball and run with it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, again, the engineering analogy I think is good. Is that I've worked on internet protocols and architecture, but I don't go out and build anything. But I have to work with people who do, and one of the things I have to do is try to understand what their problems are, what their world is, and so I think I've been able to do that in engineering and to some extent in biology and medicine, and I'm now trying to use those same ideas here. But Roger, it's all just math until we can figure out how to deploy it, and I totally agree with that.
Yes,
but I do think, I mean, we do have, one of the good things is, when we do biology and medicine, we like to try to find animal models that are predictive of what we can do in humans, and I think we have animal models here. I think we are understanding a bit more about the idea that hunter-gatherers probably were not as vicious as we are. But but I think there's a lot of work to be done on this, and I'm just scratching the surface. But I have got a few hours of details on just the social part of this, and many, many hours on the tech side. So if you can find into my Dropbox folders, which you can get through from my website, there's a lot of material that does flesh out a lot more details about these social architecture issues.
Yeah, I wasn't being flippant about this, but I mean, when one thing I've noticed with the collaboratory and the collaborators, the students that we have, many of them, strangely high proportion, are engineers, and they're female engineers. So when you use a phrase like, how do you engineer a better society? This is not a trivial sense of saying, well, fine, we know the truth test is in engineering, if it works or it doesn't work. But there's something that engineers plainly can do that is like, I'm stuck on one side of a river, there's the other side of the river, how do I get over there? I build a bridge. Well, so how do we start doing that kind of thing metaphorically, using the kind of things that you have in terms of the social justice system?
I think one of the problems is these issues of complex systems and networks and architecture is the worst taught subject in all of science and engineering. I mean, it's and if you just Google network science or complexity science or any of this stuff and go and look at the highly cited papers, it's all junk. And so the problem is the people who do really understand this stuff, they don't want you to know, they want you to buy. And so one of the problems is the people who are most expert in what I just talked about,
yeah,
they keep it a good secret. And I've been accused of encrypting everything I've ever written, and I don't do it deliberately. So I think one of the problems is the language behind architecture is very confusing. And whether it's buildings, whether it's the internet, whether it's our brains, whether it's our cells, whether it's our immune system, these are all very complex, very layered architectures, massively virtualized, so you don't see any of the details. So if you're not on the inside, you don't know what's going on. And we don't talk to each other very much about it. And it's also more art than engineering. And so that's all got to change. It's got to change if our technology is ever going to be less brittle and less fragile. But also if we're going to engineer, as you say, engineer societies that are kind. I think engineering kind societies, that is a really important goal.
Well, John, you just used the magic word that got my attention, which is the brain. So in many ways, this is where all of the ideas are coming from, and the good and bad in the world is all being generated by brains that have created a culture that and language that binds people together. You pointed that out very, very nicely. And there's another revolution that's occurring that we're living through right now, which is our knowledge of the brain is increasing exponentially because of the new tools and techniques that have become available just within the last 10 years. We've probably learned more about the brain in the last 10 years than all previous history. And, just to give you a sense, it was up until very recently the standard to record from one neuron at a time. And that gives you a very myopic view of what's going on in your head. It's as if you were forced to look through a soda straw to try to figure out what's out there, right? You can't. It's just too complex. The organization of the world is very high order. And for the first time now that we can record from literally tens of thousands up to 100,000 neurons simultaneously in many different parts of the brain. So we're seeing for the first time the incredible degree to which different parts of the brain are talking to each other, and how the information flows through those pathways. And it's really revolutionized my thinking about how to think about brain function. But I really hope that if we understand enough about the brain, we'll understand more about ourselves, who we are, and how we generate all these behaviors that we have that are very, that can really get us in a lot of trouble if we don't do something about it. But
one thing I'd add to that is in a little bit of an answer to Roger, is that taking all these ideas that I've talked about into neuroscience requires working with neuroscientists. So one of the great collaborations of my whole life has been the last few years with Terry. And so he didn't think I was crazy. And we've been working now for several years. And the brain is I would have loved to spend my 20 minutes just talking about the layered architecture of the brain. But in that, it's almost all unconscious and automatic. I mean, we have 100 bits a second or so of conscious thought, which is nothing. And so almost anything we're good at, we virtualized and gotten unconscious and automatic, including language, including math, including sports, including walking and running and everything. And so I think the layered architecture to understand en route to re-engineering society is the brain. But also the brain as being possible to be kind. I think that's one of the things we really want to understand is what helps people be kind, and how can we engineer that more into us as individuals and ultimately into societies.
So we, I think, have reached a point now where we've gone cosmic, and I want to end by asking Martin a question. Since you have studied the universe and thought about man's place in it, could you offer a kind of a perspective on our little pinprick of a planet in the greater universe, and where you think we stand? Where how do we fit into this bigger picture?
Okay, let me just make 2 or 3 points. First, let me say that you're doing the hardest job, because everything in the physical universe is very, very simple compared to the brain. Atoms and stars are very simple. So you're doing the hard job. But the other point that I think astronomers are more aware of than the average person is that there's a huge amount of time lying ahead. I mean, even those who are quite happy with Darwinian evolution and the 3 or 4 billion years it took, many somehow feel that we're towards the culmination. But astronomers know that the sun is less than halfway through its life. And even when the sun dies, the universe will go on, maybe forever. And to quote Woody Allen, eternity is very long, especially towards the end. So we're at an important transition phase. And if you ask me what's going to happen in future centuries, we're going to have these potentialities of genetic modification and cyborg technique, which we are going to, I hope, regulate quite a bit on Earth. But of course, some people are going to leave the Earth before the end of this century. I think there'll be privately supported adventurers who will go and make a little colony on Mars. Elon Musk has said he wants to die on Mars, but not on impact, and he might make it. And so what a possible scenario for the future is this, that there will be a small community of crazy pioneers living on Mars, a very hostile environment. It's not a place for mass emigration, but it's a place where few people could live. And those who are there will have every incentive to use all the resources of genetics and cyborg to adapt to this alien environment. And they may, of course, if we believe Mr. Kurzweil, download themselves into something purely electronic. If they do that, then of course, they may not want to be on a planet. They won't need an atmosphere. They may prefer 0G. So then they will go on further. And so this scenario for the future is perhaps post-human species, maybe electronic rather than flesh and blood, who will perhaps be able to go far beyond the planets. And that's a possibility. And we needn't follow them. We could stay where we are. But of course, this, what I'd call secular intelligent design, will be far faster than natural selection was. And so these new species, as it were, could evolve within a few centuries. And so this is a scenario for the future. So we can well imagine that's the long-term future. And that leads to the question, of course, are entities like that out there already? Because there may be other planets which had a head start over us. But I think it's important that this century is special, not just for the reasons which I mentioned in my talk, but also because this is the century when, for the first time, we can move to a different planet, and also can actually change human beings themselves.
Well, that was a very expansive view of our future. And I have to say, with my background's in physics and specifically black holes, I worked with John Wheeler. And so
Yeah.
I understand some of the potential that you're raising. So, I want to personally thank everybody who's participated. And I'd like to pass the baton to Roger to sort of round out the event. Roger is the director of the center that has served as the umbrella for all of these events. You're muted, Roger. Roger.
I'm muted because I thought you were going to finish it off, but never mind. So there are several topics that we have to get to and move on from this one. Trying to figure out whether the virtual formula works very well or not. But there have been a number of issues that we do want to talk about. Oddly enough, when you mentioned empathy, John, we were talking about compassion and empathy. It's a tricky area to get into, obviously. The word empathy ended up with Paul Bloom from Yale writing a book called Against Empathy, since if you're walking a mile in somebody else's footsteps and neurons and feeling their pain, it's not always the most productive way to go ahead. And compassion is a different kind of thing, but that brings you into a Buddhist perspective as well. Anybody who's watching, I would love to get some ideas from them as well about the kind of topics that really are pressing.
Kindness.
This one of the things the pandemic has done, for example, obviously has driven a great deal of attention to things. One of the questions I was going to ask earlier, talk to Martin about it as well. There was and I'm not going off topic here, it's about humans' willingness to participate. There was an interview with Francis Collins recently about a possible COVID vaccine. And he was asked the question, are you worried when we get a vaccine that people will accept it? And he said, I'm worried. Naively, I thought that if people actually saw disease around them that was causing suffering and death of people they knew, that they would have a harder time resisting the idea that this could be the best. I'm seeing stirrings that this may actually not turn out to be true. We don't at the moment have a sort of organized counter approach, but maybe we should start thinking about that. Talk about a terrible outcome here. Suppose we're fortunate and by January of 2021, I have 300 million doses of vaccine to give to people in the US and millions more in the rest of the world. And a significant proportion of the people whose lives could be saved decide they don't want it because of conspiracy theories and or false information. As a result, we end up not achieving the kind of herd immunity that you need to keep from getting this back after year after year. What a terrible tragedy for our supposedly advanced society. That's just one small point about the pictures you've seen of people going and flooding to the beaches in Florida and all sorts of places. It's non-uniform across the United States how people are responding. How does one communicate in a more effective fashion, given the technology we now have? How do we regain the trust in science? How do we get back some sort of a sense of whose word to even listen to? Martin, you've been president of the Royal Society. That was founded in 1660. That's what?
Yes. 360 years now. Yes.
360 years ago.
Well, I mean, I think it is a problem, and this is one which is aggravated by the internet. But I think most people do have enough sense to be able to discriminate a bit, don't they? If they feel they want medical treatment. But we do have to have some way of teaching people when they're young that they shouldn't believe everything. And how they can somehow calibrate people who have a track record of saying sensible things.
Yeah. But what about the triple is trying to analyze the criticism? Then John, perhaps you could have a thought on this. I'm thinking back to actually since I mentioned the Royal Society, roughly around that period, books that are still read now by people like Jonathan Swift and Daniel Defoe, Robinson Crusoe, Defoe did one on the plague, and so on and so forth. They actually produced huge changes with what they were sending out there and writing there. The audience now is so huge, and the number of people who suggest they are possessing authority in their information is also huge. I mean, it's so hard to figure it all out.
Yes. But on the other hand, a few people like Carl Sagan, etc., did really have an impact. And I think we need evangelists of that type in order to get politicians to care about climate change and things like that. And also, I would have thought, to persuade the need to get vaccinated, etc. So I think that it's got to be some scientists who are trusted by the public and are prepared to go public with all the downsides that involves. I think that should be part of the job of those scientists who are potentially good at it. Because we are in a more complicated world where we are inundated with information. And I think one of the downsides of social media is that whereas in the past, most people got their information mediated through journalists, which muffled the extremes. Now it's the opposite. Extreme views do get a hearing through social media, and of course you click on them, you'll send something even more extreme. So I think so long as we have social media, we're always going to have this problem, which didn't exist until 20 years ago, of an over-representation of extreme views. And that makes it harder for those coming fresh to a topic to be able to discriminate and end up absorbing sound and responsible views.
Yeah, and I think we thought the internet was going to be just, liberating and democratic and everything. And this, but when you build a layered architecture like that, it gets hijacked, and you've got to build in an immune system, and you have to have a flexible, adaptive immune system.
Yes.
I could have spent the whole 20 minutes talking about the immune system. It's a layered architecture that has a lot of fragilities, and we've got to do a better job of the immune systems in our technologies. Yes,
but then someone has to decide. I mean, we don't want Mr. Zuckerberg as our philosopher king, do we?
No, that's that. No, it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Patricia, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
All right. Could you deliver some grandiose philosophy? No, philosophy, I was going to say, philosophy seems to have come back in a big way, in a different kind of way, in terms of, as I quoted Cornel West at the beginning. Cornel, is out there doing his very powerful oratory, but he often is quoting and goes back to Socrates, Plato, and Socrates, and tries to remind people about this. Again, it's this love and kindness, and also the search for wisdom, philosophia. And it seems to me to be coming back in a different kind of way. I mean, is it just that I'm selectively listening to things when I'm walking, or do you have that sense that philosophy is changing and being more infiltrated with social issues and science, particularly neuroscience?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not really a philosopher, right? And I mean, I don't know what goes on in philosophy departments, but I think there is certainly, as there always has been, a sort of interest in large-scale questions about things, questions about whether or not a very different social architecture could be devised and modified so that we could avoid some of the problems that we currently face. So I think that there is certainly readiness right now, and perhaps the pandemic has rather fertilized this, a readiness to think in really big, large-scale ways about changing the fundamental organization of our social structure, at the same time realizing that there are certain fundamental values that we will almost certainly want to preserve, and the question is how you're going to achieve that.
Yeah, I guess what I was. Thank you. That's right.
I think in addition to the ancient Greeks, to Socrates and Aristotle and so forth, I think there is a renewed interest in the West in Confucius and Mencius, and I think that's very, very healthy. At least for the reason that none of these dudes really had a significant belief in a divine lawgiver. They all knew what Darwin knew, and that is values come from the brain. It comes from ourselves. It's not imposed from the outside, and that morality is not sort of, handed down by the great divine lawgiver in the sky. And Confucius and by and large, people who are Confucians still believe that. And I think that's a very, very important thing, because in the West, we tend to have this idea that, well, if you don't have religion, you don't have morality. And why is that? Well, because God tells you what's right and wrong. And Socrates, along with Confucius, were the ones who said nuts.
Right. I think there's a lot of changes going on. Terry, do you have any final remarks? And then I'll go to Martin, and then we're at 4 o'clock. So,
yeah, no, this has been enlightening, and I think it's a really interesting format that we have here with the Zoom meeting, and I've really enjoyed the discussion that we've had.
Well, let's do it. Next week? No.
Yeah, no, I loved it. It's great.
You're going to go and unpack Frederick Douglass and What to the Slave is the 4th of July on the 5th of July, and we can do that using your protocol then. So.
Okay.
That would be tricky. That would be very tricky. Martin, what final thoughts on this?
Well, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to participate in this, Roger. It's been a fascinating discussion. And I think it would be good if you can get maybe a few more speakers from Europe and continue the series. And I certainly think that it's been important to have a slightly skeptical view of AI this evening, given the huge amount of hype that one gets about it from many quarters. And I'm sure that you can continue this format and discuss lots of other basic topics, because as Pat was saying, philosophy is now becoming more related to real problems, in contrast to the way it was 50 years ago. And I think people would enjoy hearing these sorts of discussions. So thank you very much for letting me participate. And I hope the follow-up events have a fair wind. So thank you very much, Roger.
Yeah, John, do you have any thoughts?
Oh, thank you. This was a lot of fun, and preparing for it was a lot of fun, and getting to be on with two of my heroes, Martin and Terry, and of course Pat too, has been a thrill.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you to the people who have joined us virtually, and there will be more to come. Thank you very much.